Have you ever asked yourself what really happens when you stop chasing people, when you stop explaining, stop begging to be understood, stop proving your worth to those who never valued it in the first place? At first, it feels like silence, but then something shifts. The very people who ignored you, who dismissed your presence, suddenly begin to notice your absence. This is not magic, it's philosophy. It's the discipline of stepping back, protecting your peace, and allowing silence to speak louder than words ever could. The Stoics knew this truth well. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus all warned against pouring your strength into places where it is neither respected nor reciprocated. They taught that detachment is not weakness, it is wisdom. That true power comes not from chasing, but from standing still, anchored in your own self-respect. And when you embody this, the dynamic changes. The weight you once carried becomes visible. The presence they once took for granted becomes irreplaceable. In this episode, we'll explore 10 of the strongest Stoic principles to help you stop chasing, reclaim your calm, and rediscover your worth. From silence as your greatest weapon, to detachment as clarity, to closure as an inside job, each point is a step toward becoming untouchable, unshakable, and unforgettable. If you're ready for that shift, stay with me until the end, because these lessons will not just change how you see others, they will change how you see yourself. And if you value this journey of strength and philosophy, I invite you to subscribe to Stoic Reflections, not just to follow along, but to be part of a community built on calm, clarity, and timeless wisdom. 1. Silence speaks louder than words. There comes a point when explaining, pleading, or defending yourself becomes exhausting. You pour out words, hoping to be understood, but the more you speak, the less they listen. The Stoics understood this dynamic well. The more energy you waste on convincing others, the weaker you appear. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." In other words, don't argue, don't lower yourself, don't chase with words. Instead, step back into silence. That silence does not signal defeat. It signals strength, and in time, it will echo louder than anything you could have said. Silence is uncomfortable, for them, not for you. When you stop explaining, those who ignored your voice are left with nothing but their own thoughts. Your absence becomes a mirror. They begin to feel the weight of what they dismissed. The conversations they avoided return in their own minds. The clarity they ignored in your presence becomes undeniable in your absence. The Stoics believed this was the natural order of things. People only begin to value what they no longer have constant access to. Seneca advised restraint in words. He wrote, "Speech is the mirror of the mind. If your mind is calm, your words will be few and deliberate. But if your words are constant, they reveal agitation, desperation, and lack of control." By choosing silence, you not only preserve your dignity, but also force others to confront the emptiness of their own noise. Silence becomes a lesson sharper than argument. Epictetus went even further, warning his students not to hand their peace over to others by reacting to every provocation. If someone speaks badly of you, do not defend yourself against his words, but reply, "He did not know the rest of my faults. Otherwise he would not have mentioned only these." This response is not just wit, it is philosophy. It means that you don't need to fight every battle, because the need to constantly justify yourself is a kind of slavery. Silence liberates you from that. In practical life, silence has immense power. Imagine a relationship where you've always been the one explaining, apologizing, chasing. When you fall silent, The imbalance is exposed. The other person now feels the void you once filled. They begin to wonder, why aren't they explaining anymore? Why aren't they chasing? That silence unsettles them more than any confrontation could. It creates space for reflection, for realization, and sometimes even for regret. But silence is not passive. It is intentional. It is not about sulking, pouting, or withdrawing in bitterness. It is about making a conscious decision to stop wasting energy on ears that refuse to hear. It is about saying to yourself, I will not trade my peace for chaos. My calm is not negotiable. This is why Stoic silence is so powerful. It is not empty. It is full of dignity. Marcus Aurelius lived this discipline as emperor. He had endless critics, enemies, and betrayers. If he had tried to defend himself against every voice, his reign would have been consumed by chaos. Instead, he returned often to silence and to reflection, reminding himself that noise is temporary, but virtue endures. His silence was not weakness, it was wisdom. Practical application means resisting the urge to explain when it is unnecessary. Not every insult deserves a reply. Not every rejection deserves a defense. Not every silence needs to be filled with words. Train yourself to pause, to withhold, to allow the absence of your voice to speak. Over time, you will find that silence not only preserves your strength, but magnifies it. So remember, silence speaks louder than words. It unsettles those who ignored you, it protects your energy, and it becomes a mirror that forces others to face themselves. The Stoics remind us that dignity is not in endless explanations, but in the quiet composure of a soul that no longer chases. When you choose silence, you choose power, and that power cannot be ignored. 2. Your peace is not negotiable. One of the hardest lessons to learn in life is that not every battle is worth fighting, not every insult is worth answering, and not every relationship is worth saving. The Stoics taught again and again that your inner calm, your state of mind, is your most valuable possession. Once you trade it for the chaos of others, you lose the only thing you ever truly controlled. Marcus Aurelius warned himself daily, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That sentence alone is enough to build an entire philosophy of life. Too often, people give their peace away cheaply. Someone disrespects them, and they explode in anger. Someone ignores them, and they beg for attention. Someone withdraws love, and they chase, desperate to fill the void. But every time you do this, you are negotiating your peace, treating it as if it can be traded for scraps of validation. The Stoics would call this a betrayal of self. Seneca wrote, "He who is everywhere is nowhere." When you scatter your energy across every conflict, you leave nothing for yourself. Your peace is not negotiable because it is the foundation of your strength. Without it, you cannot think clearly, cannot act with wisdom, cannot stand with dignity. The world thrives on pulling you into its storms. Arguments, drama, endless cycles of explanation. But the wise man, the Stoic, withdraws. Not because he is weak, but because he understands that stepping back is the highest form of control. It is a declaration, "You will not buy my calm with chaos." Epictetus gave his students a clear warning. When someone is provoking you, remember, it is your opinion of the event that disturbs you, not the event itself. This means that no one has the power to steal your peace unless you hand it over. If you choose to protect your calm, no insult, no rejection, no neglect can truly wound you. The wound comes only from your judgment that your peace is worth less than proving yourself right, being heard, or chasing validation. In practical terms, this means redefining strength. Strength is not in how loudly you can argue or how much you can endure abuse to keep someone close. Strength is in walking away when peace is at stake. It is in knowing when silence preserves more dignity than explanation. It is in realizing that protecting your inner calm is not selfish. It is necessary. Think of how many situations in your own life became worse because you chose to negotiate your peace. A small insult turned into a war because you could not let it pass. A relationship that had already drained you kept draining you because you refused to step back. A moment of silence that could have healed was destroyed by the need to fill it with noise. Each of these was an exchange. You traded calm for chaos, clarity for confusion, dignity for desperation. Marcus Aurelius himself, surrounded by betrayal and constant conflict, reminded himself that no matter what others did, his response was his choice. He could not control their actions, but he could control whether he gave away his calm. This is why his words still carry power today. He knew the empire could collapse, enemies could attack, loved ones could betray, but his peace, if he chose to guard it, remained untouchable. To apply this in your life, you must set a boundary in your mind. My peace is not for sale. When someone tries to provoke you, remind yourself that responding in anger costs too much. When someone withdraws from you, remind yourself that chasing costs too much. When chaos knocks at your door, remind yourself that letting it in costs too much. Protect your calm as if it were sacred ground, because it is. So remember, your peace is not negotiable. It is not a bargaining chip, not a tool for manipulation, not a prize for others to earn or take away. It is yours, and once you guard it fiercely, you will find a power that cannot be broken. The Stoics remind us that true strength is not in dominating others, it is in mastering yourself, and the one who refuses to trade peace for chaos is already unshakable. 3. Stillness is power, not weakness. In a world that glorifies reaction, noise, and constant activity, stillness is often mistaken for weakness. People assume that if you do not respond immediately, you are powerless. If you step back quietly, you have surrendered. But the Stoics taught the opposite. Stillness is the highest form of power. It is the ability to control yourself when others are losing control, to remain calm when the world is demanding chaos, to step back without fear. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "Be like the rock against which the waves break. It stands firm, and the raging of the sea falls still around it." This is the essence of stillness, not passivity, but unshakable strength. When you practice stillness, you force others to face themselves. Your lack of reaction becomes a mirror. The person who tried to provoke you is left with their own anger. The one who ignored you must now confront the silence they created. The one who expected you to chase is forced to feel the void your absence leaves behind. Stillness reveals truth because it removes distraction. Without your reaction to cover their emptiness, they are left alone with it. Seneca understood this well. He warned against rushing into every fight, every argument, every emotional storm. He wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." In other words, stillness. By pausing, by stepping back, by refusing to be pulled into the current, you gain the advantage. Anger weakens those who indulge in it, but patience strengthens those who resist. Stillness gives you time, perspective, and clarity. It allows you to respond from reason instead of impulse. Epictetus also taught that self-control is the foundation of freedom. "No man is free who is not master of himself," he said. Stillness is mastery in action. It is choosing not to be ruled by provocation, not to be enslaved by impulse, not to be dragged into battles that cost more than they are worth. The one who remains still while others rage is not weak. He is untouchable. In practical terms, stillness means refusing to give your energy to chaos. When someone disrespects you, silence and composure carry more weight than any outburst. When life throws obstacles in your path, patience and steady steps build more progress than frantic reactions. Stillness is not doing nothing. It is doing the right thing at the right time, guided by clarity rather than desperation. Think about how often weakness hides behind noise. The loudest person in the room is usually the most insecure. The one who constantly explains and defends is usually the least sure of themselves. The one who lashes out in anger is usually the one who feels powerless. Noise is often just fear in disguise. Stillness, on the other hand, requires confidence. To remain calm is to declare, "I am in control, not you. I do not need to prove myself with noise." Marcus Aurelius, faced with betrayal, war, and endless criticism, rarely responded with anger. He returned again and again to stillness, reminding himself that time reveals all things, and that dignity is preserved not by noise, but by composure. His greatness as emperor did not come from aggression, but from his calm authority in chaos. To apply this lesson, begin with awareness. When you feel the urge to react immediately, pause. When you are provoked, breathe. When someone expects you to chase, step back instead. This pause is your power. It unsettles those who depend on your reaction, and it strengthens your own discipline. Over time, this stillness becomes your default state, a shield that cannot be broken. So remember, stillness is not weakness. It is the deepest expression of power. It is the strength to let others rage while you remain unmoved, the wisdom to let silence speak louder than words, the confidence to know that your peace cannot be stolen without your permission. The Stoics remind us that the calmest presence is often the strongest one. Practice stillness, and you will discover that it is not retreat, it is victory. 4. You weren't chasing them. You were carrying them. One of the hardest realizations in life is that many relationships, friendships, and even family bonds survive not because of balance, but because of your effort alone. You think you are chasing someone's attention, when in reality you are carrying the entire weight of the connection on your shoulders. The Stoics would call this a misalignment of energy, a misuse of strength. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one in the same way. Waste no more time forcing a bond that only exists because you refuse to let it die." When you stop carrying, the truth is exposed. The other person feels the emptiness, the silence, the absence of your constant effort. And what often shocks them is not that you stop chasing, it's that they never carried their share in the first place. Your calls kept the conversation alive. Your patience kept the relationship from collapsing. Your forgiveness repaired what they continually broke. Without your effort, the imbalance becomes undeniable. Seneca warned of this tendency when he wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." Many people crave your effort without ever matching it. They take your presence for granted because they never had to earn it. But when you stop carrying, they begin to feel the poverty of their own contribution. For the first time, they face the reality that they offered little while you gave much. Epictetus was blunt about such dynamics. You cannot hope to make progress if you are not willing to be thought foolish and stupid by others. This applies here because when you stop carrying, you may at first be called cold, distant, or selfish. But the truth is the opposite. You are finally refusing to carry what was never yours alone. You are reclaiming balance. You are choosing not to exhaust yourself for those who never valued your effort. In practical life, this plays out in subtle ways. You are the one who always apologizes first, even when you weren't wrong. You are the one who always checks in, while they never ask how you are. You are the one who compromises, bends, and sacrifices, while they remain rigid. These small imbalances build up until you are no longer in a relationship. You are in a performance, dragging dead weight. And when you finally step back, they panic, not because they lost you, but because they lost the comfort of your constant carrying. Marcus Aurelius, despite being emperor, constantly reminded himself not to overextend for the approval or attention of others. He knew that if a bond is real, it must be mutual, not one-sided. He wrote, "What is not good for the hive is not good for the bee. If the connection does not nourish both sides, it eventually poisons the one who gives without return. By carrying too much, you betray yourself. By stepping back, you allow truth to surface." This is not about bitterness. It is about clarity. The Stoics did not advise shutting people out, but they did warn against investing in those who drain more than they give. Energy is finite. Time is precious. To spend it carrying others who will not even walk beside you is to waste the most valuable resources of your life. Practical application means this: stop measuring your worth by how much you carry others. Start measuring by how much balance exists. If you stop calling and the silence lasts forever, that silence is your answer. If you stop forgiving and the relationship falls apart, that fall is your clarity. If you stop explaining and they never seek understanding, that absence is your freedom. So remember this: you were not chasing them, you were carrying them. And the moment you put that weight down, you do not lose anything, you reveal everything. The people meant to walk with you will adjust, step forward, and carry their share. The ones who don't were never truly with you. The Stoics remind us that life is too short to spend it carrying others who refuse to stand. Let go of the weight, and you will finally walk free. 5. Detachment is clarity. One of the greatest illusions people live under is the belief that detachment means coldness, indifference, or lack of care. But the Stoics knew this was not true. Detachment is not the absence of feeling. It is the presence of perspective. It is the choice to see reality as it is, without the distortion of neediness, obsession, or the desperate hunger to control what is outside your hands. Detachment is the art of stepping back so that you can finally see clearly. Marcus Aurelius warned himself against clinging when he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." What does this mean? It means that when you attach your peace to outcomes, to people, or to things beyond your influence, you surrender your strength. But when you detach, when you pull your emotions back and focus only on what is truly yours, your judgment, your choices, your discipline, you regain clarity. The fog of obsession clears, and you finally see the truth. Seneca explained it beautifully. He is most powerful who has himself in his own power. Attachment is a chain, detachment is freedom. When you are attached, you see the world not as it is, but as you fear it or as you want it. Every silence feels like rejection. Every absence feels like abandonment. Every no feels like a wound. But when you practice detachment, silence is just silence, absence is just absence, and rejection becomes redirection. You are no longer a prisoner of your interpretations. Epictetus trained his students to practice this detachment daily. He told them to remember that the things they loved were not truly theirs, but only on loan from nature. If your child, your spouse, or your possessions are taken, he said, remind yourself that they were never fully yours. They belonged to life, and life simply asked for them back. Harsh words, yes, but they teach a liberating truth. When you detach from ownership, you detach from fear. What cannot be owned cannot truly be lost. In daily life, detachment is clarity, because it ends the endless cycle of over-explaining, overthinking, and over-chasing. You no longer need to argue endlessly to prove your worth. You no longer need to replay conversations in your mind, searching for hidden meaning. You no longer need to fix what refuses to be fixed. Detachment allows you to step back, breathe, and see the imbalance for what it is. And in that clarity, decisions become simpler. For example, when you stop attaching your value to someone's attention, you see clearly whether they respect you or not. When you stop attaching your happiness to circumstances, you see clearly how much control you still have over your mindset. When you stop attaching to the need for closure, you see clearly that silence itself was the closure you refused to accept. Clarity comes only when the grip loosens. This doesn't mean you stop caring. The Stoics never taught indifference to people. They taught indifference to outcomes you cannot control. You can love deeply, but without chains. You can engage with passion, but without desperation. You can hope, but without dependence. This is the strength of detachment. It allows you to care more freely, because you are no longer enslaved by fear of loss. Marcus Aurelius himself lived this practice as emperor, surrounded by betrayal, political chaos, and the constant threat of death. He reminded himself again and again to let go of what was outside his control. By detaching from outcomes, he preserved clarity in leadership. His decisions were not ruled by panic or by flattery, but by reason. That is why his words endure, because they came from clarity, not from attachment. Practical application begins with a single question: what here is truly mine to control? If the answer is your thoughts, your actions, your discipline, then focus there. If the answer is someone else's feelings, their choices, or the future itself, then detach. Release the grip. In doing so, you clear away the illusions, and the truth becomes visible. So remember, detachment is not coldness, it is clarity. It is the act of pulling your mind back from the chaos so you can finally see. It is the discipline of caring without clinging, of loving without losing yourself, of engaging without enslaving your soul to outcomes you cannot command. The Stoics remind us that freedom is born the moment you stop attaching your peace to what was never yours. Detachment is not withdrawal, it is wisdom. 6. Absence creates gravity. Human nature is strange. What is always available is often taken for granted, and what disappears suddenly becomes precious. The Stoics understood this deeply. They knew that constant presence weakens impact, while strategic absence creates value. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight." Absence is a form of change, and within it lies a hidden force, gravity. When you pull back, people feel your weight more than when you were always there. Think about it. When you are constantly present, answering every message immediately, always available to fix problems or give attention, others begin to treat your presence as background noise. It becomes expected, ordinary, unnoticed. But when you withdraw, even slightly, that absence becomes heavy. It creates space for reflection. It forces others to notice what they ignored. It transforms what was taken for granted into something rare. Seneca warned against overextending yourself. He wrote, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere. When you spread yourself too thin, when you are always available, you lose your impact. But when you reserve your energy, When you choose carefully where and to whom you give your presence, you become powerful. Your presence gains weight because it is no longer guaranteed. Epictetus also emphasized this lesson in his teachings about control. He said that our value is not determined by how much we offer endlessly to others, but by how we choose to guard our time and attention. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Why? Because sometimes stepping back will confuse people. They will call you distant, cold, or detached. But in truth, you are teaching them to feel your absence, to measure your value by the gravity it leaves behind. In practical life, absence creates gravity in many forms. In relationships, when you stop chasing, people suddenly realize the void you once filled. In work, when you stop overextending, colleagues finally notice the quiet weight of the responsibilities you carried. In family, when you stop fixing everything, others are forced to confront the imbalance they relied on. Your absence pulls their attention more strongly than your constant presence ever could. This does not mean disappearing out of spite or using silence as a weapon. Stoic absence is not about manipulation. It is about dignity. It is the decision to stop pouring your energy where it is not respected. It is stepping back, not to punish others, but to protect yourself. The byproduct of this protection is that others, left without your constant carrying, feel the weight you once bore alone. Marcus Aurelius embodied this principle as a leader. He did not attend to every trivial matter or argument. He allowed space for others to handle what they could. His absence from small things gave gravity to his presence in great things. When he did speak, people listened because his words were rare and deliberate. His authority was built not on constant noise, but on chosen silence. Practical application begins with restraint. Resist the urge to always explain, always show up, always solve everything. Step back and allow space. If someone ignores your words, fall silent. If someone undervalues your effort, stop over-delivering. If someone assumes you will always be there, withdraw slightly and let the gravity of your absence teach them. Remember, constant availability drains respect. Absence, when chosen wisely, creates presence. The Stoics remind us that people only learn the weight of your presence when they are forced to live with its absence. Do not be afraid to step back. In the silence you leave behind, your true value begins to echo. 7. Self-respect is the shift. At the core of every transformation, there comes a single turning point. The moment you stop shrinking yourself to fit into other people's worlds and begin standing firmly in your own. This is the shift. This is the pivot where desperation ends and dignity begins. The Stoics understood that no external respect can ever exist without internal respect first. If you treat yourself as negotiable, as secondary, as disposable, others will do the same. But the moment you anchor yourself in self-respect, the dynamics of every relationship around you change. Marcus Aurelius put it clearly, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." Here lies the paradox. We instinctively know our value, but we hand it away by chasing applause, by bending for validation, by seeking acceptance at any cost. When you respect yourself, you no longer beg for scraps, you embody a standard, and those around you either rise to meet it or they step away. Seneca warned of the same trap. He said, "A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." Many of us suffer unnecessarily because we hand away our dignity before anyone even asks for it. We silence our truth. We compromise our needs. We accept less than we deserve, all in hopes of keeping peace or earning care. But this is not peace. This is self-abandonment. And the more you abandon yourself, the more invisible you become. Epictetus gave the most practical reminder. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. This is the heart of self-respect. It requires you to stop performing for others and start living for principle. People may call you stubborn, distant, arrogant, or selfish when you stop shrinking for them, but this is not arrogance, it is alignment. It is the quiet refusal to trade self-respect for temporary approval. In daily life, self-respect shows up in countless small decisions. It is saying no when every part of you feels pressured to say yes. It is setting boundaries without explaining them endlessly. It is refusing to chase someone who ignores your presence. It is choosing to walk away rather than lowering your standards just to be accepted. These moments, though small, build a foundation of dignity so unshakable that others cannot help but notice. When you shrink yourself, you invite disrespect. When you stand firm, you command it, not through force, not through demand, but through quiet authority. People sense when you respect yourself because your presence carries weight. You no longer over-explain. You no longer beg. You no longer tolerate treatment beneath your worth. And in this shift, others are forced to make their choice, meet you in respect, or lose access to you. Marcus Aurelius himself, despite being emperor, constantly reminded himself not to lower his standards to win favor. He lived by principle, not by popularity. He did not need every voice in Rome to approve of him, because his own respect for his duty and his values was enough. This is why his words still echo centuries later, because they came from a man who stood firm in self-respect. Practical application means training yourself daily in small acts of dignity. Wake up and keep the promises you make to yourself. Do not tolerate disrespect, even in silence. Remove yourself from it. Protect your boundaries without apology. And most of all, stop negotiating your worth in the marketplace of attention. You do not need to beg for what already belongs to you. Respect. So remember, self-respect is the shift. It is the turning point where neediness ends and strength begins. It is the decision to stop bending for those who never bend for you. The Stoics remind us that no one can truly respect you until you respect yourself. Stand firm in your own frame, and you will discover that your presence, once taken for granted, becomes unforgettable. 8. Closure is an inside job. One of the most painful traps we fall into is waiting for an apology that never comes, for an explanation that will never be given, for someone else to hand us the peace we crave. But the Stoics knew this was an illusion. Closure has never been something others can grant us. It has always been a decision we make for ourselves. The moment you stop expecting others to heal the wounds they caused is the moment you begin to heal on your own terms. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily not to depend on the actions of others to dictate his peace. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. If closure depended on someone else's words, then you would never be free, because you cannot control them. But when you accept that closure is an inner act, an act of understanding, of acceptance, of release, you reclaim your freedom." Seneca warned against the poison of resentment. He said, "How much better to heal than to seek revenge? For anger is a temporary madness." Many people confuse closure with revenge, or with finally hearing someone admit they were wrong. But Seneca knew the truth. Revenge and apology are external. They depend on others. Healing is internal. It depends only on you. True closure is the decision to stop drinking the poison of waiting. Epictetus offered perhaps the most practical advice of all. If someone does wrong, the harm is to himself. If you bear it nobly, no harm comes to you. In other words, you do not need someone to acknowledge what they did in order to be free of it. Their action harmed their own character, not your soul. The only harm that remains is the one you continue to replay in your mind. Closure, then, is the moment you refuse to replay it any longer. In daily life, closure as an inside job looks like this. Instead of waiting for someone to explain why they betrayed you, you accept that betrayal itself was the explanation. Instead of waiting for someone to admit they undervalued you, you accept their silence as proof. Instead of waiting for them to show regret, you decide that their absence speaks louder than any apology ever could. This shift is not about bitterness. It is about reclaiming your peace without needing permission. When you realize that closure is internal, you stop chasing conversations that only reopen wounds. You stop writing unsent letters, rehearsing what you would say if they finally listened. You stop hoping they will give you the right words to end the story neatly. Life is rarely that neat, and the Stoics knew it. Marcus Aurelius taught that the universe unfolds as it must, not as we wish. To demand perfect explanations is to resist reality itself. To accept what has happened and release the need for more is to align with nature. Practical application begins with reframing. When you find yourself thinking, "I need them to explain," replace it with, "I already have the truth I need." When you think, "I can't move on until they apologize," replace it with, "My healing does not depend on their words." When you think, "I need them to see my worth," replace it with, "Their blindness does not reduce my value." Each of these reframes pulls closure back into your hands, where it has always belonged. This is why Stoic closure is so powerful. It is not conditional, not fragile, not dependent on others. It is rooted in your own discipline, in your own choice to release the grip of the past. It is the refusal to chain your peace to someone else's decisions. It is the decision to step forward even when the past feels unresolved. So remember, closure is an inside job. It is not found in apologies, explanations, or recognition. It is found in the moment you accept reality as it is and stop demanding that it be different. The Stoics remind us that peace is not given, it is chosen. When you choose to close the chapter yourself, you do not lose, you gain everything. 9. Detachment breaks the loop. One of the cruelest cycles we fall into as human beings is the endless loop of obsession, replaying conversations in our minds, analyzing silences, and clinging to unfinished stories. We search for meaning where there may be none. We look for closure in places that will never give it, and we keep ourselves trapped in a loop of pain that feeds on our own attention. The Stoics understood this cycle well, and they offered a clear path out of it: detachment. When you detach, you no longer need to solve the puzzle of why someone acted as they did. You no longer beg for answers to questions that only reopen wounds. Instead, you break the loop and free your mind for what truly matters. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself to resist being dragged into repetitive cycles of thought. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This applies directly to the loop of obsession. When you stay attached, you hand your mind over to someone else's silence. You let their absence control your inner dialogue. But when you detach, you reclaim your power. Their silence no longer defines your story. You define it yourself. Seneca warned that obsession with the past is a thief of the present. "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality," he wrote. This is exactly what the loop does. It forces you to suffer again and again in imagination, long after the real event has ended. You replay what was said, what was left unsaid, and what you wish you had done differently. Each replay reopens the wound. Detachment breaks this by teaching you to let go of the need to control the narrative. The story is finished, whether or not you like the ending. The suffering continues only if you keep reading the same page. Epictetus provided the practical perspective. When someone irritates you, know that it is your own opinion which has irritated you. Therefore, endeavor not to be carried away by the impression the loop exists because of your own interpretation. You keep telling yourself the silence means rejection, or that the absence means you are unworthy. But these are judgments, not facts. Detachment teaches you to stop interpreting silence as something it may not be. Silence is simply silence, nothing more. In practical life, detachment breaks the loop the moment you stop feeding it with attention. Every time you catch yourself replaying, redirect your mind to something productive. Every time you feel the urge to analyze, remind yourself, if there was truth to hear, I already heard it. If there was something to know, I already know it. This self-talk is discipline. It is the daily act of pulling your mind out of the loop and back into the present. When you detach, you stop chasing what if and why. You stop waiting for their silence to turn into words. You stop needing to solve an unfinished story. And here is the paradox. In the very moment you stop chasing answers, you gain clarity. You realize that their silence already was the answer. Their inaction already was the decision. Their absence already was the truth. The loop is broken not because you forced resolution, but because you accepted reality. Marcus Aurelius himself lived this discipline as emperor. Surrounded by betrayals, shifting alliances, and unanswered questions, he could have driven himself mad trying to interpret every silence or hidden motive. Instead, he anchored himself in detachment, reminding himself daily that what others do is beyond his control, and that only his own reason belongs to him. By breaking the loop, he preserved his sanity in a world designed to steal it. So remember this: detachment is not coldness, it is liberation. It is the discipline of refusing to be trapped in an unfinished story, the wisdom to stop demanding answers that will never come, the courage to accept silence as its own message. The Stoics remind us that obsession is a prison built by the mind, but detachment is the key that opens the door. Break the loop, and you will discover that freedom was never outside you. It was always within. 10. Stillness redefines your worth. In a noisy world where people measure value by attention, validation, and constant activity, it feels almost unnatural to step back and stay still. Many believe stillness is weakness, that if you are not explaining yourself, proving yourself, or chasing others, you are losing. But the Stoics knew the opposite to be true. Stillness is the highest form of strength, and in that stillness, your true worth is revealed. You no longer define yourself by who notices you, who validates you, or who gives you approval. You define yourself by your composure, your discipline, and your refusal to be moved by chaos. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be like the rock against which the waves break, but it stands firm, and the raging of the sea falls still around it." This image is the essence of Stoic stillness. Life will send waves, insults, betrayals, silences, dismissals. But the rock does not chase the wave. It does not beg for calm. It simply remains, and in its stillness, it proves its strength. Your worth is not in your reaction to storms, but in your ability to remain unshaken while they pass. Seneca warned against measuring value through the eyes of others. He said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." Chasing approval is poverty. It leaves you empty because your worth always depends on someone else's recognition. But when you choose stillness, you stop chasing. You stop begging for what should never be begged for: respect, love, acknowledgement. Instead, you stand quietly in self-respect. And that quiet composure redefines how others see you. They no longer view you as desperate, but as dignified. Epictetus taught his students to value their own discipline above external validation. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Why? Because when you stand still instead of reacting, when you refuse to explain or beg, some will call you cold, arrogant, or unfeeling. But their judgment does not matter. In reality, you are building an inner strength that no opinion can take away. Stillness is misunderstood by the noisy, but it is respected by the wise. In daily life, stillness becomes your shield. When someone ignores you, stillness prevents you from chasing. When someone disrespects you, stillness prevents you from overreacting. When life disappoints you, stillness prevents you from collapsing into despair. It does not mean you feel nothing. It means you feel everything without letting it control you. You choose calm over chaos, restraint over reaction, dignity over desperation. The paradox is that stillness is magnetic. The less you chase, the more others notice. The less you explain, the more your silence unsettles. The less you beg, the more your worth rises in their eyes. This is not manipulation. It is nature. Human beings instinctively value what is rare and controlled over what is desperate and available. Your stillness creates that gravity. It teaches others what you already know. Your worth is not negotiable. Marcus Aurelius himself embodied this in leadership. Surrounded by crises, betrayals, and endless demands, he rarely lashed out. His calmness under pressure defined him. His stillness gave him authority more powerful than armies. People trusted him not because he was loud, but because he was steady. And that steadiness is what the Stoics offer us, a worth rooted not in performance, but in composure. Practical application means this: train yourself to pause. When you feel the urge to explain yourself to those who don't listen, stop. When you feel the urge to chase those who ignore you, stop. When you feel the urge to overreact to disrespect, stop. Each pause is a declaration of worth. Each silence is proof that you will not negotiate your dignity. So remember this: stillness redefines your worth. It shifts your value from something dependent on others to something unshakable within yourself. The Stoics remind us that true greatness is not proven in noise, but revealed in calm. When you stop chasing and stand still, your presence becomes undeniable, your peace becomes magnetic, and your worth becomes unforgettable. At the end of all these lessons, one truth becomes clear. The moment you stop chasing, everything changes. People begin to feel the silence they once ignored, the absence they once dismissed, the dignity they once overlooked. But more importantly, you begin to feel it too. You realize that you were never weak for stepping back. You were strong for finally standing still. The Stoics remind us that real power is quiet, calm, and rooted in self-respect. It does not need validation. It does not need noise. It needs only discipline and composure. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus all taught that the measure of a person is not found in how loudly they demand attention, but in how steadily they protect their peace. When you learn to detach, to value your presence, and to choose stillness over chaos, you become untouchable. The world may not immediately understand it, but in time, your calm will speak louder than words, and your self-respect will command more than chasing ever could. So carry this truth with you. You don't need to beg, to prove, or to explain. Your worth is not negotiable, your peace is sacred, and your silence is powerful. Live these lessons, and you will discover a strength that no rejection, no absence, and no betrayal can take away. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to subscribe to Stoic Reflections, to like this video, and to share your thoughts in the comments. Not as a chase for validation, but as part of building a community rooted in calm, dignity, and timeless wisdom.